Yeah, welcome back to my class again today. We are still on loops in Python. So today we are going to look at while loops. We've done for loops. We are going to look at while loops. And then after that, we'll look at infinite loops and then next step loops. So that is what we intend to do today. So without wasting much time, let's go right into while loop. Okay, a while loop in Python programming language continues to execute a specified statement as long as a specified Boolean expression remains true. True is any non-zero value. And the syntax for a while loop is while there's a condition, then you go in and execute a block of code. Um, in this part of the world, this is actually what we call ancestral cause. So as long as the condition remains true, that event will continue to repeat itself in the family. So that is what I want to explain today, how it happens in the computer system. So let's go right in and see how it works. All right, so this is a while loop. Now, as long as the condition is true, the while loop will continue to run. And true in this case is any non-zero value, right? That is what it is. Now, this is the flow chart for a while loop. If condition is false, if this is the condition, if the condition is false, then it goes this way and go out of the loop. If the condition is true, it will execute the statement. So if condition is true, the statement is executed. Then it will go run again, test the condition. If it is true, it will go in and run the statement. And this is the example of a while loop. So in this case now, you declare a variable count, and you assign a zero value to that variable. Then you call your while loop. This is while. You test the condition. As long as this condition is true, you continue to execute what is inside there. So what is the condition? It's saying if count is less than 5, go in and execute this. Then print repetition number, format count. What does this mean? So count is 0 in this case. Now it's going to test. Count is 0. That is less than 5. It will go in. When it gets in, what will it do? It will do count equals to, as in this one means count plus 1, then reassign it to count. That is what this is. I showed you in my for loop class. Count plus the equals to 1. What this means in programming is this augmented operator. This operator simply means add 1 to count and then reassign it back to the count variable. Then you now print repetition number. This is the string literal that you are supplying. And I told you when you see this curly bracket, it means there is an expression in this string literal. So you call the format function to supply count into this expression. So repetition number, whatever count is at that point is what is going to be displayed here. Repetition number. So I will show you this on the PyCharm. Then after the loop, once the loop becomes false, this condition is false, it will now come out of this loop and print out this. This is the end of the while loop. So I'm going to test this on the PyCharm for you to see how it works. So let's go right into our PyCharm and then test it. So these are PyCharm. So I'm going to display this. I'm going to write the while loop, the example that I just gave now. So I'm going to declare a variable, and the variable is count. That is the name I'm giving to the variable. Then assign 0 value to the variable. Then you come here and then operate your while loop. So while count is less than 5, that is the condition, less than 5. You have to go in and do what? You will now do count plus this 1. So what this simply means is the same thing as saying count plus 1. So it's the same thing as saying count equals to count plus 1. So count is 0 plus 1. You reassign it to count. So count now becomes 1. Then it will now go back and test. So that is it. So I'm going to remove this. Now you come here, print out. Now the format string, you are going to bring in that format string. I'm going to put this repetition number, then you call the format string. Sorry, you are calling it format, and then you supply count. Okay. Then you come out of this loop, go to home, and you say print. Then you supply the string. This is the end of the while loop. All right. So this is it. Now, you declare a variable count and you supply 0 to that count. You assign 0 to it. Then you come to your while loop. While count is less than 5, go in and then carry out this operation. This and this are the block of code inside the while loop. So the first thing it to do is to increment this count to 1 before you now print out what is in count. Right? It's not good. So when you execute this, it's going to print 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When count is now 6, this will no longer be true. It will be false. So it will not go in. So once count is 5, it will stop. Then it will come out and print this. This is the end of the while loop. So let's execute this and you see it's going to print out 1. It will print out repetition number 1, repetition number 2, repetition number 3, repetition number 4, like that till 5. Then it will stop. So execute. So you see repetition number 1, repetition number 2, repetition number 3, number 4, number 5. Then it will print this is the end of the while loop. So I told you that the difference between a while loop and a for loop is that in a for loop, you know the number of iteration. So you use a for loop. While in a while loop, you have to test a condition. As long as that condition remains true, that loop will continue to execute. But if the condition is false, the loop will stop to execute. Now, and I told you that true in this case is anything that is above 0, a positive value above 0. That is true. So if it is 5, if it is 1, if it is 4, if it is 100, that means true. So this is it. Declare a variable, then test this condition. As long as the condition is true, go in and do this. The first thing is increment count, then print out what is in count. So because this one came before this came before this, it has done the increment of count. It has changed count to 1 before asking you to print. So that's why it's printing 1. So it's not going to print 0. Now, if you want this 0 to be printed, then you probably have to execute this function before you test this your condition. So this is a for loop. Now, you have to be very careful. This is a while loop, You have to be very careful when using a while loop in order for it not to go into an infinite loop. Infinite loop is when the loop is not going to end. So I'm just going to demonstrate that to you now to see how a loop can go into infinity. It's never going to end. And that is not actually what you need. But there are moments in which you will need a loop to be an infinite loop. In the case of a client-server relationship, where you always want the server to continue running, expecting a call from a client, then you will now keep that server to continue running. So that is when you need an infinite loop. So I'm just going to demonstrate to you how an infinite loop works. Now, if I make a little adjustment to this, say I come here and I change this to 1, and then I come here and I say I put this, then I go in, I remove this one, right? Now, this loop is going to be infinite. It's never going to come out. It will never print this is the end of the while loop. It's just going to be repeating this repetition number. So it will come in and print this because count is 1. And while count equals to 1, repeat this. So it is never going to stop. Now, let me show you what is going to happen when you have a loop like this running on your computer system. Now, I want to execute this loop because this is an infinite loop. So I'm going to execute this loop, and then you will see what will happen to this processor. Now, if you look at my processor, it is reading 23%, right? Performance. So I'm going to execute this loop. You see, it is running. Now watch. See, immediately it shut up. And now look at what is happening. Look at my processor, 100%. So with this, my computer is going to be very slow. If I try to perform something else, the computer is going to be very, very slow. You can see this. You can see what is happening. Why? Because of this. It's an infinite loop. It's never going to end because of the condition that I gave. I am saying why the condition is true. You have to keep repeating this. And the condition is always true because count, I've assigned 1 to count. So it's telling me that once count equals to 1, then go in and repeat this. So it's going to be an infinite loop. It's never going to end. And it's going to affect my processor performance. You can see what is happening to my processor. You can see what is happening. So if I try to do any other operation on the computer, it's going to be very, very slow. Now, let me terminate this loop. Now I terminate it. Watch what will happen to my processor performance. See, it's dropping. It has dropped. Can you see that? It has dropped back to, can you see that? Can you see what is happening? So that is it. So something was affecting my processor performance. It was giving the processor a lot of work to do. And thus, it will affect any other thing that I'm doing on the computer system. So this is how sometimes virus affects your computer. So that is just what I wanted to show you on a while loop, and then I've also extended it to infinite loop. So the next class now, I'm going to show you nested loop operation, where you have a loop inside a loop. That is what I'll be showing you in the next class. So till then, bye-bye.